got a loud voice, so hopefully I'll be able to carry. All right. Well, my name's Rich. We're a nonprofit based here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We do a lot of work in 5 different states now, and we do a lot of work with autism. I'm not sure if everyone here is familiar with autism. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it in the media recently. There's a lot of stuff going on with it. About 1 in 91 children born today are born with autism, and that number is going to, for boys, is about 1 in 58. It's growing, which means that more children are affected by autism than AIDS, diabetes, and cancer combined. So it's definitely a big condition, something that we're trying to learn a lot about. One of the things that we do at the Tommy Foundation is we handle things a little bit differently. We're not one of those huge monolithic corporations that give billions of dollars of aid to research. Now, I wouldn't mind doing that. I think that would be exciting, but we actually focus more on the family and working with families, and that's one of the things that sets us apart from a lot of the other foundations out there. So one of the things that we really like to do is we like to work with the moms and dads as well as the kids. And so autism kind of affects the entire family. It's a much different way about looking at the condition. And one of the people that I always like to refer back to, one of my heroes from a while ago was, I don't know if you ever heard of Jim Carrey, okay? The funny man from Ace Ventura, in Living Color, if you went back that far. He's definitely an interesting guy, but he's actually in the new movie Scrooge, so, you know, I should get paid to plug all of his stuff. What is it? A Christmas Carol, right, okay, so, but he actually is with Jenny McCarthy. I don't know if you remember her or not. She's very famous on the news a lot right now. One of the things that I liked about Jim Carrey was that he didn't have a son with Jenny. He actually, her son developed autism, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Came with the epileptic seizures and everything, kind of changed her perspective on life from coming from the Hollywood world, if you will. And one of the things that her and Jim got together, and Jim's been a wonderful person being able to take care of her son. He's been doing a lot of great things with them. The only reason I mention him is because there's not a lot of autism families that have the fathers doing a lot of stuff. And Jim Carrey's actually one of those people who sets a great example. We had an opportunity to go meet them down in Washington at a rally about a year and a half ago, and just talk with them briefly. And you know, Jim was like a big teddy bear, and he was very, very happy, very excited about life and all the things that he was doing. And it's one of the things that we like to carry with the foundation, be able to work with the moms and the dads. So I'm going to hand this over to Suja real quick. She's going to talk more about the autism and what it actually is, in case you guys don't know about it, and also about some of the things that we do as a family. So here's my beautiful wife, Suja.
So in terms of autism in general, Rich mentioned a couple of the statistics that just recently came out from the CDC. The big thing is it's a very complex neurobiological condition. Currently, what they use to diagnose it isn't including or even looking at these kids as a whole. So, for example, the current psychological test that's used to place a child on a diagnosis of autism is quite broad, and it only is taking into account certain kinds of behaviors. So whether you have, you know, changes in communication or social interaction, but it's not really looking at things like genetics or if these kids have biomedical conditions that might be, you know, for example, Rich had mentioned, you know, Jenny McCarthy's son had epilepsy, and we actually work with a little boy that I'm going to get into in a little bit that actually has that as well. And those aren't actually things that are looked at. And I kind of like to always approach things by there's a great motto out there that's when you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. And I think that's huge, because I think that for any child, you need to remember that they're an individual first, and that even if they're displaying very specific kinds of stereotypical behaviors that might seem similar, that they are an individual and that their specific needs need to be looked at in that way. But to kind of go back a little bit, we are actually a little bit different, I guess, than some other groups in the sense that we are also parents of a child that has autism. And actually the reason I keep saying a child with autism as opposed to an autistic child is kind of what I already discussed about looking at them as an individual. So similarly, like if I had a child who happened to have diabetes, I wouldn't present them as my diabetic child. He's not my autistic child. Autism is just a part of who he is. So anyway, he is now 10 years old. He will be 11 in December. He is probably more severe on the spectrum, so he has challenges with communication and social interaction. But one of the things with autism, like I said, since they're so individual, is that it is a very large spectrum disorder. So you can have anything from very mild to more severe. And therefore you can have children that are completely nonverbal, maybe you will never potty train, to kids that have gone on. Temple Grayson is a great example, that have gone on to become authors and graduate from college and do all sorts of things. So really the sooner, one of the big things, and I know that we have people here that have actually work as what's called TSS support, so they work directly with kids. They know the huge differences that you can have and the importance of things like early intervention and getting in there as soon as possible. But our son's doing really well. One of the things that the reasons why we started the foundation in general, when we had our son, we were quite young. We were actually 20 years old, and we were both still in college. So we were kind of navigating through everything, trying to figure everything out. And our son was actually ahead in a lot of his milestones. So that's actually one of the things that we're noticing now, is that there's actually a difference in terms of what they thought about autism maybe even 20 years ago and what people are discovering now. So our son actually has what's called regressive autism, which just means that he had actually spoken in phrases and had done, did activities, was very social, liked to be touched. So none of the kind of the benchmarks that people have you look at, he was actually ahead in all of those things. And then all of a sudden, which I'm not going to get into all the controversial stuff, but all of a sudden he actually made a regression back, and he lost his speech, and he lost all these abilities that he previously had. And that's actually a big part of our story, and a big part of why we always talk a lot about biomedical intervention. But like I said, for each child that can be so different. And that actually was the frustrating thing for us, is at 23 discovering that our child had this and seeing him make this leap backwards, and saying, what's going on? Is it something that we're doing? And that frustration. And at the time, it's not like how it is now. There's so much information out there about autism, it can kind of make your head spin. Back then, Google was my best aid. So I had to, go through Google University and just look and see. And research, luckily, was something that I'm really good at. So I ended up looking at different books. I actually cried the one time because somebody handed me an old book, and I didn't know. I was a mom going through law school at the time, and I was sitting on the train reading this book that somebody had given me, and it was actually about refrigeration theory, which is back in the 60s, 70s, they thought that the reason why a child was autistic was because the mom went back to work and was like a refrigerator, so their child developed this to kind of get back at you. And thank God that that's been debunked. But I was sitting on the train going to law school while reading this about my baby, and I'm like, oh my God, it's my fault. And so I called Rich, and he was like, come home, you're not going to be any good at school anyway, it's all right. And he yelled at the person for giving me and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, we shouldn't have given her that book, that's been debunked 20 years ago. But you have to have some fun with it, I guess. But, research was a good tool for me, but, there is a lot of research out there, and sometimes, it's not the most current. So just the frustration that we had through the whole process made me feel that I was kind of called to do something a little bit more with that community, and to help parents. And what we ended up finding in the process is initially we were, because of being younger, and a lot of the parents that we were working with were a little bit older, we had some self-confidence issues about are they really going to want to listen to us, and about what we wanted to know. And